Stream now. Let's see if everything works.
Absolutely bad. Okay.
Let's see if it
So I'm
works.
gonna, can you hear me? Okay. Not gonna use the microphone unless the scouts get really loud, okay? So, welcome to our February branch. I'm sure you're all wondering why we're in this room and not down in the basement. There's a story. There's a TV show called The Handmaid's Tale. They've rented the bottom of the basement of the church, the whole basement, as their makeup, costuming, and catering department, and I believe it's Parkwood that they're down
Yes.
Yeah.
filming.
Yeah,
it.
they are.
It's lit up like a Christmas tree.
Now you can't go downstairs and bug the actors, sorry.
Nobody there right now anyway.
Yeah, that's why I got a parking spot. I absolutely thought I wouldn't be able to.
They said there were 61 extras down there, and that's why all the tables and chairs.
Oh yeah, 61 extras.
Yeah.
Locals.
I don't know where they came from, but
Okay, so this is our agenda for the night. And I'm going to do some branch reports and announcements strictly because of the scouts. So you get some of the business first. When, you know, if they're too loud, you can tune me out without missing anything with our speaker. Although Jennifer assures me she has a mother's voice and can be heard over any screaming children. Okay. So, first time attendees, we're going to ask you to stand, and it's not to embarrass you, okay? Don't think that at all. We want to know your names. We want to know your surnames that you're researching because people have found cousins in the club, okay? So, who's first time? 4? Okay, I'm going to start at the back row. If you could stand and give us your name and the surnames you're researching, and keep in mind that most of us have surnames that are not Durham region. So,
Okay, my name is Donna Terry. I live in Toronto, and this is my sister Victoria.
hi.
And we're researching the Terry family, the Lamoureux family, the Atwell family, and I think the Etwells.
Lamoureux is Pickering Township?
Yeah.
Is your Lamoureux's in Pickering Township? There's a Lamoureux cemetery.
Yeah, we visited that.
Oh, you found it.
We found it.
It's hard to find.
It was very tricky, but we found it.
Oh, that's good. Because I didn't the first 2 times I tried. It's actually quite a nice little place. It's in the pine woods and up on a hill and looking down at streams on 2 sides and just covered in fallen leaves and stuff. But there's still tombstones there, which is really nice. And I'm going to ask... Yes. Okay.
My name is Deborah French. I am researching Newfoundland, so that will be the French, the Stones, the Mercers, the Pikes, the Noseworthies, and so forth. I'm also researching my husband's tree, which is Forest from Nova Scotia. Ward, I'm deep in the weeds with that. I can't even think of their names. I've been on that website for 8 hours today.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, and then my mother's line, which is Stones and Urquharts from Ireland and Scotland.
Okay.
Eckhart's or Earcarts?
Urquhart.
Urquharts.
Okay. URQUHARDT?
H-A-R-T.
H-A-R-T, okay. And your cousins?
We're cousins, and
Yeah.
we discovered each other through DNA.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we
Right.
descend quite a way back. We go back to the Smith line of all things.
Yeah, what are the odds on that?
Yeah, exactly.
And Vokies.
It's a good one to
And
find on
yeah.
DNA.
Yeah. I started out researching my father's line. The surname is Arnsby. It's extremely rare. All the Arnsbys in Canada are related. There aren't that many throughout the world. And my tree has exploded over the last few years when I started studying DNA.
Wow.
So my mother's tree has exploded, and that's how Deb and I connect. So I've got thousands now on that line as well.
you spell your last name?
Arnsby.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether it was that or Ormsby.
Nope. With an A.
A-R-N-S-D-Y.
SB,
S-
N-A-R-N,
Yeah.
S-B-Y.
S-B-Y. I wanted the microphone to pick that up.
Okay. And we have a DNA special interest group. So, Steve will be running it. It's the 20th, I think. I have a slide. You'll see it at the end. Okay, well, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm not going to talk about the parking. I'm sure you've all noticed over the last little while that sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. This is our partner, the church. Actually, the guides at the church are doing a Shrove Tuesday pancake dinner. It's only $7. And coincidentally, it's on March the 5th. Tuesday, March the 5th.
The first Tuesday.
The first Tuesday of the month. So my thoughts are that you would come and have dinner and then come to the meeting. But again, you might be fighting for parking spots. It's only charging $7 an adult, which is pretty good. So it's a pancake dinner, and you'll be helping support some girls who are heading to Europe in 2020, presumably for a jamboree type of thing. Anyway, I do have the notice here if someone wants to come and take a picture with their cell phone. Okay.
I think the girls are cooking and serving as well.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Okay. Just a bit of news. They've updated the list of digital newspapers, digital Ontario newspapers. It's on the Ancestor Hunt. It was on the e-weekly this past Saturday. I believe, might have been 2 Saturdays ago. So you go to theancestorhunt.com. Click on newspaper links, and then you scroll down to Canada and then Ontario. They seem to have newspapers from around the world. It's huge. And we don't have a nice central repository of knowing what's been digitized and what hasn't. So this is the best you can get. And don't forget that OGS membership brings benefits. Here's a few of them. The My Heritage Library edition for $10. The recorded, anybody can see the webinars when they have them, the monthly webinars, first Thursday of the month. But if you can't catch it then, only members can see the recorded version in our members only section. This is the OGS webinar that's coming up this Thursday. We've had Janice Nickerson out speaking to us. She's a good speaker. She's tackling research challenges, the genealogical proof standard in practice, and she explains it very well. I've heard her speak at the Toronto branch on this particular subject, and it was very good. That's probably why she submitted it to the webinar people. Now I'm going to ask Sheila to come up and give her treasurer's report. Do you want the mic or not?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm going to try to relocate this microphone. Somehow it ends up right beside the projector every time, and we get the fan.
The fan, the humming.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to see if it'll fasten onto this stand, and then we'll put it out in the middle. Get it away from that fan.
Okay.
Start.
Yeah, you can start.
Okay, so for our current account, January up till today, we have had $674.12 withdrawals and $161.72 deposit. So our balance is $2,909.62. We have some outstanding deposits to come.
We still have donations, $73 from 2018. And then the branch membership fees should be about $2,100. So our balance will be $5,022 when we get those checks.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently the office has mailed them, but they said that a little while ago, so we haven't seen it yet.
No, not yet.
Okay. I don't see B's, so the correspondence will just whiz by that one. And that didn't last very long, so I'm going to fast forward through a couple of slides and do a few more announcements that would be normally after Jennifer's presentation. May 11th, we are going to have Saturday Day of Learning, 9 to 4. And the theme, I should say, not the topic, but the theme, which I didn't have for you before, is Fresh Approaches to Thorny Problems. And the call for papers is going in tomorrow morning to the e-weekly and out to the libraries and archives in the area to see if we can find speakers to talk on that theme. Okay. Conference 2019. There's their theme, Breaking Down Genealogical Barriers, at the London Convention Centre towards the end of June. Apparently it's a beautiful brand new venue. And the conference page, you can get to it from the front page of the OGS website, ogs.on.ca, and register. Oops. I think that's all I can put in there. So at this point, even though
Do you want me to just talk and then you can take a break?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
And you can just sort of judge by how people are moving in
If they're
the chairs.
wiggling?
If they're
Yes.
wiggling, yeah. Okay. Okay. There it is, end. And let's bring up no name. Yes, there it is.
Jennifer, you gave a talk to us once before, didn't you?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Yeah. When we were at the library, I guess, in Oshawa.
Yeah, last time I've been at,
You gotta click right at the front, or near the front of the pack. Yeah.
Max and I don't get along.
I'm gonna let you,
There you
Got
go.
it, woohoo.
You got it? Okay. Okay. That wants you to change the name. Come back out to the picture. Oh no,
I think
looks
it's
like it's
open.
gonna go. There you go. And if you want the presenter view, just go up the slide show and there's presenter tools. It says view presenter tools. There you go. I'll get my junk out of the way. You got a left, right,
okie dokie.
and a very faint pointer.
I'm not worried about that.
Okay.
So, my name is Jennifer Weymark, and I am the archivist from the Oshawa Museum. And I was out here, I think it was 2, maybe 3 years ago. I came out and spoke to you on a research project that I had undertaken, and it's an ongoing research project focused on early Black history in the East Whitby Township, or Oshawa. And it's an ongoing process. As you know, research never ends. More things come available, more avenues for research. So I've continued that. I actually recently spoke at the Oshawa Public Library about that research project. And it, like I said, is ongoing. I'm not sure research ever actually ends. You just keep going and going, and then you take a break, and then you come back to it. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, and it's part of what we're doing at the Oshawa Museum. And I'll talk about that, and then I'll go back to my actual presentation. So part of what we're doing is working to change and challenge the traditional narrative and talk about some of these stories that maybe haven't been looked at before and haven't been told. So things such as the early Black history. We're looking into early Asian history in our community, as well as women's history and things like that. So all of these stories that weren't maybe traditionally told or really looked into, we are focusing on that now. And part of that will be a brand new book we are writing on the history of Oshawa. There hasn't been one on the entire history of our community since 1967, so some things have changed. You know, time has passed. I was born, so I mean, you know, it's been a while since we've had a new book on the history of Oshawa. So this is a project that we are undertaking now. We're aiming to have it completed for 2024, which happens to be the 100th anniversary of the city of Oshawa. So we thought that would be a nice little gift to the city, is to have a brand new look at the history of the city itself. Now, I am from the Oshawa Museum. Who has been there? Good. I'd like to get everyone there at some point. So the Oshawa Museum tells the story of Oshawa from the earliest inhabitants, so we look at the Indigenous story, to present day. We do so through these 3 beautifully restored Victorian homes that are located in Oshawa's Lakeview Park. Now, the museum itself dates back to 1957, when the Oshawa and District Historical Society was formed. In the 1960s, the Henry House Museum, which is the one top corner here, opened. And by 1985, the museum grew to include Henry House, Robinson House, and Guy House. As a result of this growth, we were no longer just known by the house name. We thought it'd be great to have a name for all of the buildings, so we became known as the Sydenham Museum. Now that changed, and the idea behind the Sydenham name for the museum was our relationship with the harbor. All 3 of these houses have a relationship to that harbor, and we wanted that to be included in the name of the museum. Now, when you meet a longtime resident of Oshawa, they'll often still refer to the museums by the Henry House Museum, the Robinson House Museum, typically not the Guy House, but definitely Henry House and Robinson House. In 1989, however, we officially changed the name to the Oshawa Community Museum to better represent what it was and what story it was that we were telling. We're a small local history museum located on the shores of Lake Ontario. In fact, we are the only local history museum in Oshawa. Oshawa has numerous museums, but we are the only one focused on telling the history of our community. All of the others are very specialized. We have the Automotive Museum, talks about autos. We've got the Regiment Museum that looks at our military history. We have Parkwood Estate that looks at the history of the McLaughlin family. We are the only museum that looks at the history of our community as a whole. And we do that in our Victorian homes. Now, a little bit about our collection. We have a mandate to collect Oshawa's material history. Now, we have very specific themes within that. One of the first themes is first settlement. So we are looking at the period of time when European settlers came to the area and looking at why they chose this area, how it developed, and how it has impacted and created the city that we know today. Another area we're looking at is reaping the resources. This city has a history steeped in industry and in development, in the harbor, in agricultural, and all sorts of ways of using our community to reap the resources and to bring in wealth and people. Moving from there into industrialization. Oshawa was once known as the Manchester of Canada. Industrialization made a huge impact on our community, and obviously it's a very important factor in what it is that we collect and what parts of the story we tell. And then Oshawa today. We don't just stop in our collecting practices, we continue, because what was once new and modern is eventually going to become old and artifact-like. So we continue to carry on in our collecting practices. The museum itself now has over 30,000 artifacts in its collection. Some notable artifacts are a McLaughlin carriage that was built in 1867. It's one of two surviving that was constructed by Robert McLaughlin, and it includes a hand-painted mural on it that was done by Mr. McLaughlin himself. We have a Williams, and that piano is actually on loan right now out in Alberta at the Remington Carriage Museum. So we loaned it to them, and they helped pay for some restoration work. All in all, it was a great partnership with them. The Williams Piano Company, another familiar name if you're from the area. We have one of their pianos that dates to 1904. We have a huge Smith Potteries collection. We had a well-known pottery company here in Oshawa, and we collect on their pottery. We have two 1837 Rebellion boxes, so the prisoner of war boxes that were created. We have two in our collection. We've researched, there are two of like 10 or 11 that are kind of known to be out in the public sphere. We have a large textile collection that shows men, women, and children's clothing. We have specific items that relate to the families. Obviously, Henry family, the Robinson family, the Guy family. We want to tell their stories because we're using their family homes. So we collect on them as well. So we also have a large archaeological collection. We have over 10,000 items that have come from the Grandview site archaeological dig, as well as items that will be coming to the museum from the 407 excavations.
Where's the Grandview site?
Oh, the Grandview site is located at from just south of Taunton on Grandview Road North. So you guys know where the movie theater is? Mm-hmm. So to the west of it, there's all those houses. That is where the Grandview site was located. And it was one of the second Indigenous villages that were excavated in Oshawa. The first was the McLeod site. That was discovered in the late 50s, 60s, and they did archaeological excavations from 1962 up till the 1975, I believe it was. And that information told us that the Indigenous people were here about 1450 is what the McLeod site dates to. The Grandview site dates earlier. It dates to about 1400. So between the two sites, we know of what the ancestral Wendat and what their lifestyle was like here. So from 1400 to about 1500. These people were here, and this was their home and their community. And these archaeological finds help us to tell their story, which is a very important story. Each of these three buildings that we have at the museum help to tell different aspects of our history. The homes date back to the mid-1800s, and were occupied by some of Oshawa's early prominent families. The Guy House, which is our yellow wood frame building, dates to about 1846. You may notice that the dates I give you don't match the dates that are on the signs. Remember how we talk about research, ongoing research, new research? We wanted to look into our own history, and we did a little digging, and we discovered there were some errors made. So at some point in the history of Guy House, it was dated to about 1835. I was writing a book on Guy House, so I started doing some research into it, and that was a little early. So it dates to about the mid-1840s. But it's still a really great example of early farm-style vernacular architecture. At the moment, Guy House is our administrative building. It's where the archives is located, it's where the staff offices are, as well as an opportunity for us. It's our largest programming space, and if you've been in there, you realize it's not really all that large. But we've got in there a chance to display items and other sorts of displays in the Verna Conant Gallery. Currently, at the moment, we have a great partnership with an artist by the name of Eric Sangwine. Does anyone know him? He's phenomenal. He does these amazing caricature works of art. And what he does is he comes down and he researches stories in the archives, and he creates these little caricatures. So right now we have an exhibit that is looking at Lakeview Park through his caricatures. We have archival documents and archival photographs that he's based his paintings on, and then we were able to, there's some right here, be able to kind of tell the story of Lakeview Park in a very interesting way. The one you see here is called the Big Bang. In our collection, we have what's said to be a cannonball from the War of 1812. Eric, when I was telling him about this, about how, the Farewell House was apparently bombarded by Americans, and there's this whole story and mythos around this. And I said, apparently we have a cannonball from when, the Americans attacked. So Eric was very excited to go check out this cannonball, and then he started laughing when he saw that it was about this big. Yeah, so that's why, if you can't see it very well in this picture, but it's just the big bang, and then it goes bloop bloop, and there's this tiny little cannonball on the bottom, and the cannonball is right there. So he thought it was funny. So he's taking a really humorous look at our park's history and about our early history along the lakefront area. Robinson House, which is a really amazing tall 2.5, 3-story brick building. We use this as our gallery space. So we have rotating exhibits in that building. The second story is our Indigenous gallery. It is brand new. It was redone last year, and it opened up. And so this is looking at the Indigenous history in our area. So it's talking about the ancestral Wendat. It's talking about the Mississaugas, and it's talking about where they are today and their impact on our local community. Now, the bottom floor of Robinson House is used as rotating exhibit space. At the moment, we have an exhibit on the medical history in Oshawa. So it's something, if you want to come down and look at early doctors or look at Melissa's really cool medical collection, you can come and check that out. And then finally, Henry House. Henry House is our period home. So when you go into it, we have it set up to look like it did when the Henry family lived there. What we have done, though, is unlike a lot of period homes, is we haven't made it static. It's not to a specific date. The Henrys lived in this house from its construction in about 1840 up to 1914. There was someone of the Henry family in this house. So we have tried to make the display live and be alive like the Henry family. So there's artifacts from those different time periods set throughout the house. Now, tonight, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the archival collection and kind of how it can help you. The archival collection came to be when a group of Oshawa residents formed the Oshawa and District Historical Society. The group was given the mandate by City Council to form a collection that would help tell the history of Oshawa and to showcase that history in Henry House, which was to become the museum. Over the next 3 years, this was in 1957, the members of the Historical Society worked to compile a collection of artifacts and documents that help tell the history of Oshawa. Now, during the early years of the museum, the well-meaning members of the ODS or OHS collected anything and everything they deemed old. They made no distinction between museum artifacts and archival documents. They collected all the items together and organized them together. And when I mean anything and everything old, I had a huge collection related to the royal family that had absolutely nothing to do with Oshawa, but it was old and really cool. So, this meant what would eventually become the archival collection was organized in a manner that was similar to the museum collection and not like typical archival collections. Items such as photographs and documents were put into storage by subject. So if the photograph had something to do with carriages or automobiles, it would be stored with them as opposed to stored with what it came with. In the mid-1980s, however, it was decided to remove the archival items from the museum collection and store it separately as an archival collection. Pulling the items out of the museum collection meant that we had to impose some sort of organizational system on the items, since original order, which is a very big thing within the archival field, was lost. In the 1990s, the OHS hired its very first professionally trained archivist, and she took this collection and placed order on it. She took all of this mass of documents and photographs and made sense of it and made it so that we can easily access the items and the information that is in it. Fond, which is the traditional way of archival collection is organized, wasn't possible, but some sort of order was needed. So, what was done was to stick with the idea of the museum subjects. So the collection was divided up by subject headings. So, banks, buildings and structures. The things that most interest you would be number 13, genealogy. So within those subject headings are individual vertical files that relate to the subject. For example, within the cemetery subject, there are vertical files pertaining to each and every cemetery located in Oshawa. The genealogy files are sorted by last name, but not specific families. Some of the files are very, very thick. Others are very sparse. But the genealogy files are not the only source of information concerning family histories in our collection. I'm sorry, I keep walking between the phone there. We have a huge collection of land deeds, mortgages that have all been indexed by last name and some by lot number. We also have several early atlases, including an 1895 County of Ontario atlas that can help us find those early settler families. The photograph collection was also separated from the archival collection, and it was stored within a filing system with each individual photograph given its own number, and photocopied so that researchers could go through it and determine if that photograph would be something that would help their research. This form of organization is not what a traditional archives would do. It's not up to the traditional archival practice. However, it is one that works for our collection, and it's one that makes it very simple and very well organized, and one that we can easily research and pull information from. This is a picture of Mr. John Robinson, as well as a land deed related to him that's in the collection. But I decided in about 2010 or so that we were at a place in our collecting practices where something needed to change. Our storage room had run out of room. There was no room to add anything further. We had fixed shelving, which you can see in these pictures, and filing cabinets that were full. So we decided to apply for a MAP grant, which is a Museums Assistance Program grant, to replace those stationary shelving with rolling shelves, compressed rolling shelving, which if you've been in my storage room is tiny. And we had to be concerned with the fact that this is a heritage house, right? So you can't put a lot of extra weight on the floor lest the entire collection end up in the basement, which is not ideal. So we went with a lightweight storage solution, which gave us a little bit more time and a little bit more room to grow the collection. While we were doing all of this rearranging, it was decided to also change somewhat how it is we organize and begin collecting items. So here are my nice new shelves, and they're not that new anymore since I got them in 2011. But as you see, they gave me a bit more room. Today, the archival collection is divided up into two different collecting styles. We have the fond, which are the traditional ones. So when items come in, they stay within that collection. So I have a new collection that has come in from a gentleman who was an executive at General Motors. So this is everything that he collected during his time working there. It's staying together as its own collection. It will be the William Kane fond or collection, and it will stay as is. Now, the odds and ends, bits and pieces that come in, you get one or two items, they will get put into the old system. The larger collections that come in will stay as a collection. I have a great nursing alumni collection, an Oshawa Fire Department collection, the Durham Electrical Association collection, as well as pretty well every school that has closed in the area has contacted me to gather up items from their schools before they closed and bring them to my holdings. Today, we continue to collect and preserve Oshawa's documentary history for researchers today and in the future. We have set several collecting priorities that we feel are vital. One of those priorities are collecting hard copy newspapers due to the simple fact that they don't exist on microfilm. I don't know about how many of you tried to research in Oshawa using the newspapers. You may have noticed there's gigantic holes. Unfortunately, a series of fires meant that we lost a great deal of our newspaper records before they were microfilmed. So we have a fantastic collection from about 1862 to 1872 on microfilm. It's great, pretty well every day, it's there. 1872 to 1922. Huge gap. Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking, yes. And then 1920s are sparse. The 30s aren't bad. And then the 40s, another big gap. So you'll take note that there's some rather large major world events that kind of happened during those time periods. World War I, World War II. That we don't have newspapers. So what we do is we've made it a priority to collect during those gap years. So any hard copy newspaper that comes to me during those gap years becomes part of the collection, no matter the condition it is in. And I have a few in my collection now that I wouldn't normally have taken because they are falling apart, but they may be the only one of that day in existence. But we don't just hoard them, right? I mean, there's no point in me just keeping them and not making them available. So what we have done is actually made them available online. So, about 3 years ago, I filled out a documentary heritage program grant, which is probably about 4 years ago. Huge grant offered by Library and Archives Canada to make our newspaper record available online. So I sent off all of our microfilmed newspapers, so all of the ones from 1862 to 1872. I sent off the odds and ends ones that we have on microfilm. And then I had someone come in and photograph all of my hard copy ones. So all of those newspapers that we have, the ones that are available from 1862 to 1930, that was the cutoff date because we couldn't afford to do any more than that, those are all up online. There's a link on the Oshawa Museum website. They are searchable, although remember that early newspaper, the font used on early newspapers makes optical character recognition, or OCRing, really challenging. So basically, you're just better off to sit there and go through the papers, which is what I do. And if you're anything like me, you'll lose a whole day, maybe two, down the rabbit hole that is a newspaper. So those are done. They are available, and this is an ongoing process. So more newspapers as they come in, we will have them professionally photographed, as well as then sending them off to have them uploaded to that website.
When they come in, just people find them when they're doing renovations,
Yep.
and they know to bring them to you?
Yeah, and we've really made it an effort to get out that these are the newspapers that we want because of those big gaps in the collection. And what's really, really cool is every once in a while I get super lucky. The one that's on the right-hand side, well, your right, my left, is a really interesting newspaper because it ties into yet another research project I have going. Can you see that picture of that gentleman there? Handsome, isn't he? Just a little guy right here. Right here.
Okay.
His name is Private William Garrow Jr. I have his letters that he wrote home during World War I to his sisters in my collection. I also have all of the official documents and paperwork that his family got when he was killed. What I didn't have was an obit. I don't have a photograph of him in uniform. I don't have any of that. I was going through my hard copy newspapers. I have 2 newspapers from 1916. One of them is with his obituary. So I got really lucky there. Yeah. And that's it. Another one that you guys have all seen the photograph of the airplane crash in downtown Oshawa? Yeah. Sure. Those of you who are not from Oshawa, Google airplane. Yeah, 19
the side of the building.
Yeah, it's dangling off the building. I actually have the newspaper telling about that event too. And that one, I think I have 4 newspapers from 1918. I happen to have that one. So, it's pretty cool.
So if people have things that are cut out of newspapers from that time period, obituaries, or if somebody saved something in the scrapbook from those days, do you collect those if you don't have anything?
I do collect them. The problem with that is most of the time people fail to write down the name of the newspaper and the date.
Yes.
Which then makes it a lot less usable. I mean, with obituaries, you can usually figure it out, but I have all these wonderful collections of scrapbooks where they failed to write down, so you can't reference it, really, right? You're like, well, it looks like it's about this date. So I do collect them, but ideally I want as much information about it as possible, so that when a researcher's coming in, they can actually go back and reference it, as opposed to, newspaper clipping found it. Yeah, exactly.
Miscellaneous scrapbook doesn't convey a whole lot.
No, it doesn't, and it always hurts when you're like, I'm not really sure where that came from. So, and beyond just the newspapers online, we have really been working on getting as much of the archival collection online as we can through various mediums. So, on our website, which is this side right here, if you go to the research section, at the top we have some EPUBs. So these are all electronic publications related to exhibits that we've done. So they'll give you research. So there's the one on the morning after exhibit, which is Victorian funeral practices, the one on the sea shanty exhibit that looks at the Oshawa Harbor. But if you go further down, we have our finding aids. The finding aids are a collection of online resources and digitized documents. We have in there a finding aid for the Clayton Shaver Fire Department collection. It's fantastic. It really lets you know what is in that collection. So if you're looking for a relative of yours who may have been a firefighter, that'd be a great one to look through. You check the finding aid, see what we have in that collection. It will let you know. You contact me, we work it out, you can come check it out. But we also have on there, and it's really hard to see, sorry about that. I didn't realize it was going to be so tiny. We have a digitized version of the 1911 fire insurance map. So it has been turned into a searchable PDF. So it is on there. I'm going to put up the 1921 because that's no longer under copyright. So I will put that up there as well. There is, what else is on there? Oh, the 1898 municipal plans for the city of Oshawa. I'm currently working to create searchable PDFs for the 1930 and 1935 municipal plans that I have. So slowly but surely, we're working to get a lot of the archival, easily digestible research bits and pieces available online. It takes time, it takes money, and I just recently purchased the program that let me do some of this stuff, so it's really exciting if you're somebody like me who can create all these things now. And then we have our online database. So if you go into our website and check collections, on the right-hand side here, we have how to search through our online database. That is it's for 3 different collections. There you can search the collection of the museum, you can search through the archives, and you can search through our photograph collection. Keyword searchable like any sort of search engine. Our focus is trying to put collections on. So I have a fantastic photograph collection called the Lowry Lakeview album. So this is literally an album that a woman, Mrs. Lowry, donated to us that is like Lakeview Park in the 1930s. So it's heyday of this park, and it's gorgeous. The photos are fantastic, so you can search through that. But we've also got the Henry family collection. We've got all these different collections that you can search through. So we're working to break down barriers. So maybe you can't come to us, but we can put as much of it as we can online. Again, though, it gets a little expensive, so we're trying. So this is from the 1911 fire insurance map and the 1898 municipal plan for Oshawa. So this is available, or they will be if they're not yet. The 11, yeah, both of them are available now. On our website, you can go in, click it, you can download it. They're all copyright free, so you can download it, keep it yourself if you want to have a 1911 fire insurance map. I'm not sure why you guys maybe want it, but I like it, and they're really cool. So, and they're really neat just for kind of research purposes. So, continue collecting. An archival collection is never finished. I continue every day to accession new items into the collection. You should see my table at the moment, which is like my reading room, my processing area. It's filled with all sorts of really neat stuff that have just recently come in. So I'm working through it slowly but surely, and they will have to be entered into the database and hopefully available up for searching as soon as possible. It's ongoing. Like I said, every day new things come in. We work to collect and fill in those gaps. So, as I mentioned before, we're looking to tell the stories that maybe weren't told before. So my collection focus is I'm looking at things that maybe weren't collected in the past. Items such as that relate to Oshawa's labor history. Oshawa has a fantastic labor history. We played an incredibly important role in the labor movement across Canada that's not as well known as it should be. So I'm working to collect that. I recently purchased a series of press photographs from the 1937 General Motors strike. The strike brought the labor movement to the automobile industry in Canada. Hugely important. So these items are coming into my collection. Newspapers, as I've already mentioned, incredibly important for helping us to understand the day-to-day aspects, for looking up obituaries, for looking up births. So I'm trying to fill in those gaps. Correspondence. Personal correspondence is a gold mine. In 2013, a gentleman came in and dropped a box on my desk. And he said, "I'm sure you're going to like this." And I looked at it and went, "What is it?" Because it was literally just a mess. We dumped it out, and it was essentially the contents of Thomas Henry's desk. So Henry House, I don't know how or why or where this all came to be, but it was letters from his children to him. There were letters about his role in developing the Christian church in Orono. There were receipts. There were partial sermons that he was writing out. It was incredible. It took us all summer to even remotely kind of organize this because it was just chaos. And we just finished and published a book on this collection because correspondence allows us to see our community in a very different way, right? It's intimate. It is talking about what's going on in ways that newspapers don't. And it's fantastic, and it's something that we desperately try and collect. To the point where, if you check out one of our online resources, it's actually a transcription of a diary that a gentleman kept. His name was William Elliott. And he kept a diary from 1882 to 1930. Wow. Some of the days are pretty boring. You know, he's like, well, it's cold out today. And that's it. But other days, he talks about taking a train into Toronto. He talks about these first time he saw an automobile. Like, these are all these little bits and pieces that help us understand how our community grew. And they're really cool, and they're really fascinating, and we're trying really hard to make them easily accessible. So I'm lucky enough that I have a fantastic volunteer who is spending her time doing transcriptions for me. She's the one who transcribed these diary series. It took her 2 years to transcribe this diary series. Currently, she's working to help me transcribe my Sons of Temperance collection. So she's going through minute books and membership lists. And that will, when she's done in probably another 2 years, will be available online. Yep.
I thought there'd be a Daughters of Temperance rather than a...
Nope, Sons.
Sons of
Yep,
Temperance.
yep.
What date is Sons of Temperance from?
Ooh, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I want to say it is mid-1800s, like 1870s is what I'm thinking. But I'm not 100% sure. You got my email, you can send me one. And I'll let you know. Yep.
In the 1980s, I have a relative, didn't live in Oshawa, lived in Millbrook, but he wrote a diary too, but he didn't have a lot of paper. So he'd write a little bit on here, and then he'd turn the page, and maybe 2 years later, he'd fill in the rest of that page with
that's
another little bit of what he was.
I think it's crosshatch writing is the name of it, and that is so hard to transcribe. So hard. I'm looking at some of the handwriting going, wow, that's challenging. But yeah, when you start doing all these different ways, good heavens, but they're so helpful, and they're so useful, and they're just, and really interesting, right? They really let you know kind of what's happening in your community and the different ways that you can learn about them. So these are just some of the things. You guys have, I was going to say, questions? Any further? Yep.
I remember reading in the newspaper that you had archaeological digs from Trent University.
Yes, we did.
So what Where and what did they find?
The first two were in the Garden of Henry House, and then the second one was further north of Henry House. So that is a partnership with Trent University that will eventually end up coming to us. Some of the cool stuff they found an 1820s, 1830s merchant token, which was really neat. So this is before, standardized money.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. What else did they find? Buttons, like cutlery, those kinds of things, odds and ends. They were hunting for the midden or the garbage dump, or the outhouse, since we have yet to find it.
Oh.
So yeah, 3 digs in, we don't really know where the Henrys placed their outhouse. The reason why is when you stop using your outhouse, that's where you would dump the stuff, right? So
Yes.
I mean, they haven't been able to find that yet.
Yeah.
We're hoping to have them back again. They did find some artifacts north of the house that are raising some interesting questions. There was wood. Again, I'm not an archaeologist. The archaeologist was super excited. I didn't quite understand why. I'm like, it's wood. But it's charred wood that didn't disintegrate or something. So it's something to do with a fire, and what they think is a forest fire or something.
So it ended up as charcoal, basically.
Yeah, like I said, she was super excited about it. I'm more interested in like the pottery pieces and those kinds of things, but she was really excited about it. And it just showed again how far and how much the creek has shifted too, because there is sediment from the creek that was located just north of Henry House.
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
And what about burials in that area?
Nothing that we've ever come across. I mean, we know where the Harbor Pioneer Cemetery was located. It was located on the east side of the harbor, and then in 1975 it was moved to the west side of the harbor. Beyond that, there weren't even any fish bones, which they thought was interesting because they expected for sure that the Henrys would eat a lot of fish given their location beside the lake, but maybe they didn't like fish. I'm not sure. There were no fish bones. Other bones were found, but no fish bones.
Well, the Toronto Star today brought back that 1937 strike.
Yep.
Comparing it to, Mitch Hepburn happened to be the premier at the time, and he had the police become the strike breakers to bash heads and things like that. And I guess the guy who wrote the article was comparing it to Doug Ford and appointing his friend to OPP.
Well, that was actually what led to Mitch Hepburn's ultimate downfall, was the 1937 strike and how that was all handled. Yeah, he had his, the Hepburn Hussars and the Sons of Mitches. I thought that one was clever. So that was what the police that were brought in to break up the strike were called. But yeah, ultimately that how he handled that strike prematurely ended his premiership, and then Gordon Conant came in. Gordon Douglas
I'm hoping
Conant.
for a replay in the case of our current premier.
Not disagreeing on that one.
I don't mind expressing my political opinions.
But yeah, it's interesting to see it. And honestly, the 1937 strike played such an important role. It's something that not a lot of us know about. And that is definitely going to be an entire chapter in the new book that we're working on, is how that strike changed Oshawa and the impact it had on Oshawa's residents. The economy, the economic impact of it was huge. Beyond just the personal impact of the day-to-day labor. So that's something that we are, one of those gaps that we're working to fill in to make sure that people know about it. A lot of people know about, the McLaughlins. They know about the big name families, but we don't know a lot about the people who worked for the big name families. And that's kind of the stories we're looking to tell now. Are there any other questions? Yep.
Just on the strike there. Have you run into much about Pinkerton's security coming and helping?
No, I haven't yet. I mean,
I believe my grandfather did.
Oh yeah.
And I gotta be careful how I phrase this. It's decommissioned. We have a pistol in the family.
Yeah.
And when my mom went into nursing home, that was one of the things that's actually a prohibited one, because it's made to be concealed.
Oh, interesting.
And it was all properly papered,
Mm-hmm.
and legally, I checked. I could inherit it and continue to keep it. I can't sell it and all that, but given it was of age and what it was, I actually had it decommissioned, which means it's a toy now.
Yeah.
But
It was used in the 37 strike then?
apparently worked, and I don't know for sure it was a 37 strike, but I believe at times I was told he worked at Pinkerton's and he had this, and he also had stores, and he was killed working for Gen Auto in '58.
Yeah.
And so he did a lot of things, but I was heard that this was one of the things. He worked for peddlers as well.
And it's just kind of the start of our research with it. I was collecting those photographs. There's huge. The Archive of Ontario has Mitch Hepburn's files, obviously, because he was the premier. And there's whole sections related to the strike. Interestingly enough, apparently before they were given to the archives, there was culling done from that time period. So I'm not sure what's in there. And they noted in the finding aid that documents have been removed and were removed prior to being donated. So that's really kind of interesting. And one of the really cool things that I just recently had digitized and have not had an opportunity to put up anywhere is it's a really interesting movie called Nation Builders. So it is a tour through the General Motors plant in 1937. So this is before the strike happened, I believe. And it takes you through the plant, and it is a really neat look at what would have been now known as the North plant, but looking through and how automobiles were made. It took you from the start right through to the finish, and they drove off a car at the end, and it's a really cool thing. So we just haven't had a chance to upload it to our YouTube channel yet, but we will. And check that out too. Our YouTube channel are filled with podcasts where we talk about all sorts of different aspects of Oshawa's history. The most recent one is one that I did, I believe. The one we're sharing at the moment, and it's looking at the tale of two brothers. So it's looking at two brothers who, during World War I and their experiences, they're all part of my early Black history. So we're looking at, the difference between being part of a segregated unit and not being part of a segregated unit, which would have been these two brothers' experiences. So, yeah. Are there any other questions? Yep.
Are you working on the 55 strike?
I have photos and stuff. I haven't even, It's huge when you start digging into these things. But that was a monstrous strike again. And the impact on the community just because of the length of that one was huge. And that's one that I'm hoping we can maybe even do a bit of oral history with, because there are people still around who were part of the 55 strike. But we do have some really, really great photos from that one as well.
You better interview them soon.
Yeah. I know, and that's another project I'm working on, is collecting oral histories and experiences of displaced people. So people who arrived here post World War II. Oshawa was a huge area for refugees to come. And we thought when we started the project, their stories, the impact of Ukrainian refugees, Polish refugees, Russian refugees on our community is monstrous. It's huge. You just go and look at Fiesta and all the pavilions, right? The impact of these refugees arriving dramatically changed Oshawa. And it ties in really well with kind of what's going on in the world right now. So we wanted to talk about, the experiences of those who came here post-World War II and the experience of those who are coming here today. What are the pros and cons to, the system that was set up, or lack of a system that was set up post-World War II, and the systems that we have today. Yep.
There's a significant collection of newspapers and photographs of the 37 strike in the CAW Hall in Oshawa.
Yeah, I know. They do a great job of collecting their stuff. I'm hoping we can work together.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting, that you talk to them, because it's a significant collection.
Oh, yeah, I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I would really, really like, but it's all about conversations, right?
And I have a copy of that 1937 tour tape.
Isn't it cool? It's really neat.
Yeah.
I actually had to take it to the Pickering Public Library because I had it on VHS.
Well, I had a 1937 Chevrolet up until a few years ago.
Yeah.
And somebody who knew that gave me the tape.
Yeah, this was donated to me by a gentleman who also gave me a huge aerial shot of General Motors that dates to about that time period. So it's really kind of neat. And then it's been done from time for me to finish it. reel to reel, and then put onto VHS, and then I took it from VHS and made a digital copy of it. So I mean, it's clearly from the original reel to reel. There's, sometimes the sound disappears, sometimes it comes back, but I mean, just the visual of it is really neat. So.
Is yours reel to reel or is yours VHS?
VHS.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Someone at some point sat down and made a whole bunch of VHS copies of this reel to reel. I don't know who it was originally. After the news about General Motors broke, I had a couple people approach me and say, I have this VHS copy. Would you be interested? And I'm like, well, actually, I don't have one. I've had it for a few years now, and I've had it digitized. So but it's a really neat look into Oshawa's past.
Yeah, and I'm not certain. I have one of those VHS tapes too, but they had sort of a, I wouldn't call them press, but people in the plant that put out a bulletin, usually once a month or so.
Yep.
And that particular person was the one that got me that tape. I can't tell you exactly when it was, but it would be probably about 1960 or 60.
Yeah, they were still producing the Craftsman magazine at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, so, and we've got actually a huge collection of more of the war Craftsmen, and we're working on digitizing those as well. And then some of the Craftsman newsletter. So.
Do you have the Oshawa worker?
Odds and ends on that one as well.
Well, a company printed one called GM Topics.
I have some of those as well. Like, it's kind of all hit and miss, right? So it's kind of interesting, the different perspectives too, right? You've got the union one, and then you've got the company one, and they're very different usually.
You've seen the National Film Board on the internet's got The Grievance. Have you ever seen that?
No.
That's worth looking at. It follows a grievance process. It's a very fair thing. It follows a grievance process right through. And it was filmed at, through the plant and all that. But if you looked at National Film Board and
the Nations Builder one, I believe, is the National Film Board one as well, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a couple months since I looked at it. Yeah.
Well, if people have some of these magazines, which they might have around their house in the attic or something, is there a place online that you can look to see which issues you already have? So they might.
I'm working on indexing those. Yeah, it's a work in progress.
So
it's kind of send me an email. My cards are here, so you're welcome to take my card.
So if you had an issue or 3 or 10 or something, you could just email and say, do you have these? And then.
And if I don't.
Yes.
I would like them, yes. Okay. Yeah. It's always about kind of filling in those gaps, right? Yeah. And that's where the archival collection is constantly growing. So, new photographs, new documents, letters, all of that. Anyways, thank you so much for having me out today.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. There you go, Sheila.
Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Donation for the
Historical Society. They will love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I suggest we have our break now.
I've been talking and talking.
That's fine. We got lots of time. That was very interesting. How about a 20-minute break?
How are you doing? I'm good. Oh, I know.
And it was a good space place up at Pantlick. It was in the closet. As an older gentleman, right?
Okay, I think we better reconvene.
Okay, thanks, Bob. If I really need it.
Okay.
Okay, this is just a quick talk on
turn it off.
how you can use signatures to help determine your ancestry if you're stuck. This is a Claughton-Clafton study. Now, it seems strange. I've always heard the name as Claughton, the first one, and yet when you get back into the records, sometimes it's spelled Clafton. But when you get looking, the word laugh is actually in Claughton, so maybe that's where the Clafton came from. I don't know.
Maybe they actually pronounced it that way.
They might have been back in England. It maybe was pronounced. I presume it was actually when they interchanged like that. So, but it certainly didn't come over the pond with that pronunciation. This was my problem. Joseph Clafton married Mary Smith in 1779. in Guiseley Parish, Yorkshire, and he was buried in 1793 in Farsley, which is as a resident of Horsforth, which is a chapel in Guiseley Parish. Mrs. Clotton, nice, they didn't even tell me Mary or anything else, so I can't even be 100% sure I have the right marriage, but it's the only one available. But Mrs. Clotton, she was buried in 1831 at the age of 70, so she was born about 1761. The fun part, they belonged to the particular Baptist church in Farsley, so they were not Anglicans and did not belong to the Church of England, and that kind of throws a monkey wrench into everything. There are several baptisms for Joseph Clotton's in the Church of England records that could be him, but I had no way to determine which one was him, if so, or even if he was baptized into that religion. So that was my problem. One clue I did have. This is the marriage record. Joseph Clafton and Mary Smith, both of Horsforth, married 1779 by banns, which is interesting. So they married into the church by banns and not by license. So he presumably was part of the church at that time. And it was witnessed by Joseph Clafton.
John.
Or it's John, sorry. I can't read the own writing. It's clear as day. So that was basically my clue. Joseph could not sign, neither could Mary, but they had a Clafton that could. Now, I'll just point out one little interesting thing of the signature here. See the top of that J? Most of the other J's are usually curve around like this. There's a J there, and you can see that one curves around, except I messed it up. And even the J up in this record. And the way they've written it there. But John put a line more or less across the top. So that was kind of my first thing. We can thank Lord Hardwicke and his Marriage Act of 1754, which he did pronounce that they had to have, each parish had to have a separate marriage register, which records witnesses, the signatures of all parties, the occupation of the groom, and the residence of the couple. It also enforced bans and made clandestine marriages illegal. So we owe this guy a little bit of thanks. So I went looking through all the records for Guiseley Parish and the surrounding areas, and I copied out just about every Clotton record in there that had a signature. If it was X, it was useless, but if they had a signature, I copied them all out. So there was this John Clotton marriage, 1776. He married Anne Marshall. They were both of Rawdon, which is also in Guiseley Parish. And they were married in the Guiseley Church in 1766. And there's his signature. These will be blown up in a couple of slides later, so you don't have to memorize the shape of anything. Okay, marriage witness 1767. 1 year later, Martha Clotton got married to George Ryder. So they're both of Horsforth again in the parish of Guiseley. And she couldn't sign, but here we go. There's a John Clotton who can sign his name again.
You think he got to be a witness so much because he could write his name?
You better believe it. I think that is exactly half the reason some of these guys are on these records. And quite often, the other guy is related to the minister. and he could sign too. That's half of it. So I have kind of 3 records showing a John Clotton. There were quite a few others, but there's a reason for these 3, and this is why. When you get the close-ups, the 1766 one, which is John Clotton's marriage, very similar to 1767. If you look at them, they're virtually the same. Not a problem. Nobody would have a problem saying the same person wrote those. So Martha Clotton's witness was the same John Clotton that married the other lady. This one, in 1779, we've got 12 years gone by. Little bit different. He still has the cross across the top, and it just curves around. He does not link that to the O, so that's another little clue. The shape of the H and the N, everything is consistent with these Johns, just not quite as perfect on the top. He left off the one loop there. Either that or the ink dried out on him as he was doing it. And of course he's spelled it Clafton now. It's just to make it harder to match up. But the C, same general outline with the two curls on it, same way round. And there's a bit of a break between the L and the A on each one of them. And the A's more or less shaped the same. This one looks like he's getting a little older and his handwriting's getting a little shakier maybe, but it's not too bad. And then of course we have to jump to T-O-N, and same type of thing there. He doesn't link up. See how he's left spaces in there? Now you can kind of understand on the F a little bit maybe, but he doesn't. He's left the same space, and his O and his N, they're all generally the same shape. I spent a long time analyzing these things, and I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. He's just changed the shape slightly in 12 years. That's all. Because of the top of the J, most names did not do their J's that way. It is definitely different. Then when you put it with the rest of the information, Martha Clotton, there's only one married in 1767 that would be the suitable age. And she's the daughter of John Clafton or Clotton, you get to both, and Mary Briggs. It's a couple spellings for that. And she was baptized 1742. She has a brother John, baptized 1745, and a brother Joseph, baptized in 1753, both in Horsforth. They would be both of reasonable ages to marry in 1766, age 21, and 1779 for Joseph, age 26. So that all merges in nicely with the fact of the signatures. Location. Everything points that John Clotton Sr., the father, he was described as a laborer, fellmonger, and skinner, and was a resident of Horsforth Parish. And my Joseph, I don't know his occupation, but he was also of Horsforth Parish. And I had to Google fellmonger because I had no clue what it was, so I put it down here. And that ties in with the skinner part of the thing. A dealer in hides or skins, particularly sheepskins. So I learned something as I was doing this as well. And I'll never need to know it again, but at least I learned it at the time. As far as the names of the kids, they had 6 kids that I'm aware of, and I could tie each one of them into the John Clafton and Mary Briggs family. So because I don't know Mary Smith's parentage, it's not quite as helpful, but they are at least family names from the Clotton side or Clafton side. It would be helpful. I've actually tried this method with all the signatures and things on Mary Smith, and because it's Smith, you can guess the result. At least so far. So the names do fit, especially Nathaniel was kind of an important one because it's unusual, and it's not, I think that's about the first entry into the family, other than because it was named after the great-grandfather Nathaniel Briggs, which is handy. DNA. It actually had good results on that. It's just a tiny 13 centimorgan match to another descendant of John Clotton and Mary Briggs, and we believe we're 5th cousins once removed. Interesting part, my Claftons came to Canada in the 1840s. His Claftons went to Sweden in the 1850s. Wow. 2 different areas. So it's tied us back together after a couple hundred years type of thing. So that was kind of neat. But it does support the fact that, yes, we are Claftons or Claughtons, and we all come from the Horsforth or Guiseley Parish area. Bonus results. I did search the whole area around looking for signatures, and I found this marriage. Didn't realize it was there, but John Claughton, the husband of Mary Briggs, probably married a second time after she died in 1766. Actually, that helped me identify which Mary died in 1766 as well, but I was pretty sure it was her, but this helps to confirm it. Because I don't know anything about John, but John Claughton signs, very similar actually, except for the J, to his son. But he was of Guiseley Parish, and he was a Skinner. So that's why I know I have the right one. And he married an Anne Booth, and it was done in 1768 in Calverley Parish. So I got an extra marriage out of the whole thing just by analyzing all the Claftons in the area. Because Calverley is a little bit away, so it wasn't right obvious at the time. So, if you want to do a little bit of work, those signatures on the parish records, they won't be in the bishop's transcripts, but they are in the original parish registers usually. They are original signatures, if it's not an X, and you sometimes can match them up and make it work for you.
Now that you're retired, time-consuming means what? Days on long days, or?
I probably spent probably 20 hours or so overall on it. Maybe not quite, but probably.
Okay.
I have 4 pages of signatures.
Does anybody have any more questions for Steve before he sits down?
Parish records, how do you access the parish records?
It depends. These ones happen to be on Ancestry. They work for Ancestry has part of Yorkshire on there, which just happened to include those. You almost have to go to the different companies to see what they have. Ancestry has a great selection of Northamptonshire records as well. And Find My Past has some, and et cetera, and also, now this won't help you for those, but a lot of the bishop's transcripts you can find at familysearch.org. They're kind of hard to find sometimes. You got to go into the catalog and down to the location, and there is a lot. Durham is one that particularly has a lot online at Family Search, and parts of Northumberland, I believe it is. So Yorkshire, yeah. Only part of Yorkshire's on Ancestry in this format, anyways.
Yeah.
So,
Middlesbrough, Yorkshire's on.
I think it's closer to the Sheffield area, Sheffield or Halifax. Sorry, I meant to say Halifax. So Halifax and over from there. I know they have those. But it is only part because they went from certain archives in Yorkshire, and that's where they got them, and that's why it's only a certain bunch.
What about Pickering and Malton? Do you know those towns?
Pickering's on the sea.
Yeah, it's probably not then, because this is more the west side.
East Riding, perhaps.
It might be. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But
I have ancestors in Skelton in Cleveland, and that's sort of the northeast part of Yorkshire up into Northumberland. That's called the Cleveland area. And it seems to me, I remember from way back, that Pickering isn't that, it's fairly north on the east coast, so I would assume it's East Riding.
Yeah, well, this is definitely West Riding that was there.
I think it's East Riding. There's Hovingham, and I have a whole bunch of them all in the same general area.
Yeah. And I know that the Skelton is close to Guysborough, if that helps, which is spelled almost the same as Guiseley, Guiseley, whatever you want.
I say Guiseley, but I've never heard it pronounced properly, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, I
That's
have
my
heard
pronunciation.
Guysborough, so I know that one's correct, or close. It's funny, you get over there and things are pronounced like they brought the city names with them, and their town names with them, and we got all sorts of stuff over here, and invariably we pronounce it a different way.
Well, Derby and Derby is a good.
Yeah, Derby,
I hate-
Leamington and Leamington. England, it's Leamington. I grew up in Windsor, Essex County, Leamington. There's lots.
Do you have a question?
Well, it's more of a family search. You have to be careful with them because I was looking for one of my great-grandmothers, her last name was Noseworthy, but I couldn't find proof of her. And Family Search didn't have anything in any of the children's records, but I was at the church in Harbor Grace looking at records, and there it was. So for 2 or 3 years, I was looking for proof of this Carolyn Noseworthy, and it was on 2 of the children's birth records, but whoever transcribed the records to Family Search neglected to put it on. And it's too bad because it would have saved me 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, some of their stuff they don't have the images for. So.
Although they are pretty good for Newfoundland now, that even Ancestry has some of it too.
Well, the church that I went to, unfortunately, is not sharing with the rooms. So I was just big worrying and still to try and get in and look at those records, and I managed to, and I was really happy that I did because it did solve one of my brick walls.
Well, that's
excellent.
good.
Yeah, because that's not a fun place to go back too far in as far as Newfoundland goes either, because so many records, there's so many holes.
Well, yeah, a lot of church fires, a lot of them back then, so yeah.
Speaking of family search, this has nothing to do with what you were talking about, but the 1926 images are on for the prairies. So apparently they will be transcribed maybe by March, but the images are there and you have to scroll through and see where you are.
I believe I read somewhere that Library and Archives Canada had received the index from Family Search, and we're just doing some checking on it, and then it will be up. Okay, so it obviously Family Search is going to have the images, and so will Library and Archives Canada, which doesn't matter because they're both free.
That's where my day went.
Yeah.
This is a pretty basic question for you genealogist. What's the difference between the bands getting married by bands versus a license?
Okay. Steve will correct me, I'm sure. Banns have to be read in the church, or both churches, if you're from different parishes, 3 consecutive weeks. And that was to give people time to object if there was a reason to object. You could circumvent that by going and purchasing, bands were free, purchasing a license, and I forget where you had to go and get it, probably from the bishop. And the more well-to-do people tended to do that because they could afford it. But most of, I'll call it our people, the ones who came over here, were poor. And so they went the band's route. I have seen one or...
Did they get a certificate then at the end of the 3 weeks?
I believe that if they asked the parish priest for it, he would write them out a little piece of paper saying they were married, proving they were married. But
quite often there's either a separate book or sometimes indexed or put together with the marriage themselves. That you get the dates.
So there's
Other
a marriage
times it'll just say
register book.
band's done.
And as Steve said, I have actually seen the band's book, and they actually would write in the dates that the bands had been read out at church.
And what about 3 bands, but the marriage was by proclamation? Do you know what that is?
Marriage by proclamation might have been one of those irregular marriages, Steve?
Yeah.
No, I think that's just after the banns are done, they proclaim that they can be married because there was no objections. And
Okay.
that would be my take on it anyways.
Well, in the United Church, we had our banns read three Sundays.
Yeah.
And then there was a separate marriage ceremony, and I think that's the way it's done. And usually people who had their banns read were people who were more regular churchgoers. I don't think you would come in off the street and ask to have your banns read.
No, you
That
had to
could
be a
wrong.
member of the
parish.
community to have them read, because they were kind of also, we'll say, verifying that it was going to be a true and
Lawful,
Legal-
true and
lawful
lawful marriage with
marriage,
no
yeah.
impediments.
And just one thing, always be careful, just because the banns were read, doesn't mean there wasn't necessarily a marriage
That
happened.
followed, yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
We have a piece of paper too, though.
Aren't you lucky?
Yeah, the normal course, you have the banns, then you have the marriage, and the banns take the place of the license.
Yes.
And you still
That's
have
exactly
the marriage
right.
certificate.
Yeah.
But I know our church, United Church, we used to, current minister doesn't do them, but in the past, we always did banns. And sometimes, I remember once a minister said they'd been read 2 times before last year. And you know, like it was like, and there'd been a slip somewhere in the middle. And then so the third one, there was quite a,
Quite a distance
yes,
apart.
because I remember he was discreet in how he said it, but it was like we're reading it for the third time, and everybody's saying, I don't remember this.
Okay. So, next month, after the pancake supper, we have Bob Dawes coming up. He lives down in the Quinty area, down Trenton Way. We've had him several times before, and we've always enjoyed his lectures. They've been very good. He's got something now he's calling the Family History Reno Project. Now, I don't know if you've noticed or read blogs or heard any announcements, but Thomas McKenty from the States was really big on this genealogy do-over. You know, you put everything away except maybe some original certificates, and you start it over again with a clean slate and only put things in your genealogy program that you had verified. You know, no hearsay, no nothing else, okay? And yeah, I guess my database is probably close to needing that too. Anyway, he's promising to show us how to do the easy do-over without having to lose your database of all those names, but a way to go through and verify your research. Because, of course, what you know now today as a genealogist, you probably didn't know when you started 10 years ago, or 15, or 35, or whatever. Actually, it's more like 45 or 50 now. I think I was 14 when I started, just a few years ago.
29 minus 14.
Yeah, exactly. That's about it. So I'm looking forward to that one. I think that's going to be really interesting. Bob is a good speaker. And then in April, we've got Cher Letou's lined up. She has done many lectures for us over the years. This one we haven't got a title for yet, but she went over Ireland last year. So we're going to learn what she learned, and we're going to ask her how she prepared for the Ireland experience. So that might be very interesting. She's always entertaining. Here, the DNA Special Interest Group, we are returning to our original third Wednesday of the month. We now have our office and library and a great big table in there, and we hope it will be back a little more in place by the time they get here next, in a week and a half or 2 weeks. February 20th at 7 o'clock, up in the branch office. Wednesday nights, we're hoping, it's just guides here on Wednesday nights, so we're hoping there'll be a little more room in the parking lot for you. Now, I think we got time. If anybody has a problem they want to bring up and see if anybody's got any insights. I haven't given you much. Often we don't get to this. But if you remember dates and names and the problem, you're welcome to stand up and run it by us. A lot of expertise in this room. You guys want to get out of here, that?
Yes, Joey, go.
Okay, okay, whoops. Okay, so at this point, I'll call Sheila and we'll do our 50-50 draw. So get your tickets out.
Okay, so we have $12.50. Here, Deb. Okay, last three numbers are 138. Oh,
Just after me.
look in my pocket.
Oh, were you two people after me? Because it's two people after me.
One person before
Oh,
another.
my God.
Oh, you
One-
did. Okay, there you go. Congratulations. Awesome.
Oh, there.
Bound to happen eventually.
It's about time, though.
Deb, did you write down the number of people attending?
Yes, I did.
Awesome.
Yes.
So you're safe. You can leave now.
Well, I didn't win, so I'm gonna leave now.
Anyway,
Oh,
this
you
is
mean
our
everyone
contact
else?
information.
I thought you meant I could. You mean all of us?
I mean, all of you. Otherwise, I was going to make you sit there while I counted. We like to keep tabs on how many people come out to which lectures.
Yep, there were 23 people tonight.
Awesome. So, that's our next meeting, and safe home, everybody.
Where will the next meeting be held?
We're down in the Sunday school room,
That's
in the
not-
basement, down the stairs, but not to the right. Here in Northminster, yes.
Yes, but not where the dinner is.
No, the dinner's over in the big room that we were in December and December, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And Sunday school's on your left. When you go down the stairs, it's to your left.
Okay.
Okay?
Where we had Dan Buster.
Thank you. I think
That's where we were.
let's just say, at the end of all this, we should know every room in this church.